Prince Andrew there, battling sex assault claims. He is, of course, the second son of Queen Elizabeth. He's become a virtual recluse, according to reports, holed up in royal estates. There are many, of course, across the UK, so he's not in difficulty, but certainly in a place where he can't move around in public, it seems now. He has no public role, having stepped back from having any kind of role representing the royals because of his links to the Jeffrey Epstein case and a disastrous interview he gave to the national broadcaster in the UK, trying to clarify and clear his name over the links and the claims surrounding his friendship with Epstein. The once popular royal seen his reputation then shredded by the allegations relating to his friendship with Epstein, and of course the woman Virginia Roberts Giuffre, there she is, who has brought or is trying to bring a civil case against Prince Andrew. That may or may not go ahead, depending on the interpretation of the settlement in 2009 that she reached with Epstein over the abuse that she suffered because of him. Well, let's get some analysis on how this is all being viewed in London. Mark Roche joins us. He's London correspondent for the French weekly news magazine, Le Point. Mark, very good evening to you, sir. Hope you're okay. Is there a sense where you are that for Prince Andrew, no matter how this case evolves from here, he's already been tried and convicted in that most volatile of places, the court of public opinion?
Well, it doesn't exist anymore, whatever the outcome in New York, which we are all waiting. The press is saying that Prince Andrew definitely will not be part of the celebration of the Platinum Jubilee in June, the 70 years of the Queen on the throne, because this event is so important that nothing can torpedo it. And at the moment, all the royal news are completely overshadowed by what's going on in New York and what was the role of Prince Andrew in all this pedophilia scandal.
And Mark, for the royal family, I think you were just hinting at it there in that answer. Just how embarrassing is all this? The story constantly on the front covers and in the headlines?
Well, the Queen is very popular, and in a way, all what's happening is reinforcing her popularity, but she's 95. The succession is in order. The royal family has been limited in number. Prince Andrews is out, but other royals are out. And the public in this time of uncertainty needs stability, and the monarchy provides stability. The Republican movement is not gaining any ground from the problems of Prince Andrew. The problem for the palace is that the preparation of this jubilee we suppose will be the last of the Queen, and the preparation of the succession are all overshadowed by these sordid stories coming from New York.
Indeed. The Platinum Jubilee, of course, which is officially going to be commemorated in summer with a whole series of events, isn't it, Mark? And I know you're well across that and you know exactly what's happening, but just for our viewers, 70 years on the throne is what they're marking. As you say, most likely to be Queen Elizabeth's last Jubilee. I think it's probably not too pessimistic to say that, looking at her age now, as you say, 95. Back to Prince Andrew, serving military man once upon a time. Once upon a time, he was the most popular member of the royal family. All that now seems a long way away. He's under pressure, as I understand it, to relinquish, to give up some of his military titles.
Well, he cannot, as you said, represent the Queen anymore, because that has been taken from him after the disastrous interview he gave to Newsnight, the program of the BBC, where he said he never met Mrs. Juliet. The problem is that he is still ahead of various regiments on honorary presidency because he was in the military, he fought in the Falklands, hero of war. But in fact, the regiment themselves, including the Guards, the most prestigious regiment with guarding all the royal palaces, is demanding that he step down because it's an embarrassment for its member, it's an embarrassment for the soldiers, and the Queen, as the head of the armed force, will have no other option than to get rid of him. And allow other royals to take some of his position. We think at Prince William or Princess Anne.
Marc Roche, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us. Correspondent for Le Point, the French weekly news magazine there. Marc, based there in London.
Legal argument on a number of fronts where the prince is trying to get the case dismissed, where the plaintiff is saying the case should continue. And this is going to be a critical ruling because if the case is dismissed at this point, case is over. If the case moves forward, that's terrible news for Prince Andrew on a number of fronts.
And our thanks to George, Dan, and Victoria for that interview and analysis. Well, coming up, we are traveling to Rocky Mount, Virginia, a small town, on a settlement agreement between Epstein and the accuser as the royal family faces growing pressure over the prince. Foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest for us from London.
Secret court documents revealed in the long-standing civil case between Prince Andrew and his accuser, Virginia Roberts-Giuffre. Andrew's legal team have unsealed the 2009 settlement Giuffre reached with sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. It shows she received $500,000 and that she would not involve parties associated with Epstein, including, quote, royalty, a term referenced in the original lawsuit. Now 38, Giuffre claims she was trafficked for sex by Jeffrey Epstein and accuses Prince Andrew of having sex with her on several occasions and in multiple locations, including New York, starting when she was 17. These are claims he's denied many times.
I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact.
Attorneys for the Duke of York argue those documents should prevent him from being sued and exclude him from further litigation. It's not the only argument the Duke's legal team is using to try and get the case dismissed. They say Giuffre lives in Australia and not the US, where the suit was filed, and they've requested a delay in the evidence Giuffre's attorney has tried to present. In an interview with the BBC, the Duke of York admitted to having known Epstein through his longtime friend, now convicted sex offender, Ghislaine Maxwell, who he met in 1999.
I'd known her since she was at university in the UK. And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends.
The interview was part of an extended one-on-one BBC special, where Prince Andrew said he'd stayed in Epstein's New York City property even after Epstein was convicted of sex trafficking. And it was this response to allegations made by Giuffre that made it a now infamous exchange.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at.
Andrew has denied Giuffre's claims, and his attorneys have called her lawsuit baseless, meant to achieve another payday. It's not known when the judge will make a decision on this, but the pressure does just keep mounting on Prince Andrew, and whatever the outcome, I think it's unclear when or if he'll return to his duties as a member of the royal family. Kira?
Well, we will.
Are arguing why a US judge should dismiss a civil lawsuit against him. They claim a previous settlement between his accuser and Jeffrey Epstein from 2009 releases him of liability. Virginia Giuffre accuses the Duke of York of sexual assault, which he denies. Legal expert Joshua Rosenberg says it's reasonable for the Duke to use the past agreement in his defence.
She is suing for compensation. If she's already had $500,000 in compensation, then Prince Andrew could quite reasonably say, why does she want any more? And surely she has agreed to settle this already.
The Prime Minister is due to give an update on the coronavirus in an hour's time, as Number 10 admits the NHS is facing a...
The judge said that he will issue a ruling in due course. He didn't issue a ruling at the end of this court hearing, saying that he understood the passions and appreciated the arguments that he'd heard. You'll have a decision pretty soon, he said. I am not going to define that further. But I'm bound to say, having listened to that for the last hour, and let's just remind everyone, I'm not a lawyer, but having listened to it for the last hour, it was pretty evident in which direction the judge's ruling is heading, and it's not in Prince Andrew's favour. His lawyers at the beginning of the hearing, insisted that that agreement signed by Virginia Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein back in 2009 that was released only yesterday, an agreement that saw Virginia Giuffre being paid $500,000 in compensation by Jeffrey Epstein, even though he explicitly did not concede to any guilt as a result of signing the settlement agreement. Prince Andrew's lawyers said that the document was unambiguous, that clearly Virginia Giuffre intended to release a broad category of individuals, including royalty, from any future legal action. Remember, there's a clause in this document in which Virginia Giuffre releases people who are known in the document as other potential defendants. And so the Prince's lawyers were arguing that Prince Andrew is another potential defendant and therefore is released and freed from the prospect of being sued by Virginia Giuffre as a result of her agreement to sign that deal with Jeffrey Epstein. But the judge sounded very skeptical about the claims that the Duke of York's lawyers were making, suggesting that it's impossible fully to understand what Virginia Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein thought they were agreeing to because the language used in the document is imprecise. The judge also zeroed in on two other sections of the document. One section that we talked about on the program yesterday that suggests the agreement is not admissible in any proceeding or case against or involving Jeffrey Epstein. In other words, why are they even talking about this agreement, given that the agreement itself is said to be inadmissible in courts of law, but also a section of the document that saw both parties, Jeffrey Epstein and Virginia Giuffre, agreeing to keep the agreement secret. In other words, the judge appeared to be suggesting that for two separate reasons, the document is not a legal agreement on which the Duke of York can base a request for the case to be dismissed. Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, David Boys, also suggested that the agreement was even more restrictive than the judge appeared to be proposing, arguing that it specifically applied to the legal jurisdiction in Palm Beach County in Florida, where the agreement was signed. And of course, that is a jurisdiction in which Prince Andrew is not currently facing any legal action. This civil lawsuit by Virginia Giuffre has been lodged in the Southern District of New York. And the judge seemed to accept the argument that this agreement applied to legal proceedings in Florida and did not necessarily allow itself to be used in courts outside the Sunshine State. This was complex legalese that was underway. At one point, there was an exchange that almost sounded like that old Marx Brothers routine about the party of the first part and the party of the second part, that contracting scene from A Night at the Opera. But once it was over, the judge said that he is going to go away and consider his decision. It didn't sound as though the decision is going to be too long in coming and presumably will be published to the court's website where all the documents relating to Virginia Giuffre's civil lawsuit against the Duke of York find themselves residing. But the takeaway from this hearing is that it was a pretty vigorous back and forth between lawyers for the Duke of York and lawyers for Virginia Giuffre, but the judge who's going to make this decision certainly did not sound like a man who was being swayed by Prince Andrew's legal counsel. Indeed, at one point, responding to something they'd said, he simply turned to them and said, "That dog is not going to hunt, it's not going to happen." So that gives you a sense, perhaps, of where this legal ruling is heading.
Simon Marks reporting live on the end of that hearing. The case will end, I'm sure, when we get that judgment, which, as Simon reported, will be, quote-unquote, pretty soon. This hour, we're hearing from people working in the NHS.